Hello, Hockey World. Today is Thursday, May 15th, 2014. I'm Julie Robenheimer.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Buzz the dog.
And I am Eklund. And you are watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com. We're a special guest today, Buzz the dog. This is his first appearance, actually. He's excited to be here.
Yeah, he's thrilled.
On cue.
For a second, I thought it was Josh Rimmer.
That's hilarious, Mike. Good job. I like that. All right, so yes, we are here speaking to you. Sorry, we're making the camera over there. We are here speaking to you live today. If you're joining us on the live stream, we really appreciate it. Live is our new thing. We're going to be Monday through Friday. You'll hear us live at 1 p.m. And we'll be here 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and whether we're ready to go or not. So join us then, and we'll be here with any luck at all. So I had no sleep last night. I went to see Bruce Springsteen with my wife for our 15th anniversary in Hershey. I drove home, got her on a flight to Seattle at 6 a.m. in the morning, and here I am. So I did watch the games, however, this morning. I still haven't slept, but my gosh, Julie, what a night! Let's start in Montreal. Let's start with Boston, Montreal.
Well, I thought all I wanted is a good game. You know, when it comes to Game 7, you don't want to blow out. You don't want the referees to get in the way. All you want is a really good game, and we were fortunate enough to have that the other night between New York and Pittsburgh. It was a fantastic game, a crazy finish. Loved every minute of that game. So I was very much looking forward to the same thing last night between Boston and Montreal. I mean, honestly, that's what we wanted. When we found out that those two teams were playing against each other, we all wanted a Game 7.
No question.
So I was pumped for it. And then I was let down, which is a bummer. Because when you come to Game 7, you better show up. And the Boston Bruins did not show up. This was like a pod people version of the Boston Bruins. And I was not a fan. Then there's all sorts of, issues in regards to the referees and penalties. And, I mean, I think there were a couple pretty bad ones. But the worst one was the one on Brad Marchand for snow showering the goalie. And, I mean, honestly, it was awful. It was an awful, awful call. And I agreed with Pierre Maguire and how terrible it was, especially being a Game 7. But, I mean, honestly, the Bruins just came unglued. Absolutely unglued. And we saw it, pretty much come to a head at the end of the game, especially in the handshake line. And, lots can be said about that. But
yeah, we'll get to that.
Congratulations to the Canadiens. They, played a really tough series. And with the exception of, I think, maybe 10 minutes, the Bruins were completely outplayed.
Oh, yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
So, people want to say, well, they deserved a better fate, blah, blah, blah. Well, if they deserved a better fate, they should have been a little more dominant consistently than they were. And really, only I think it was the last 10 minutes of Game 2 that I really felt that they dominated any part of that series.
And maybe the last 5 minutes of Game 1, like they had the same kind of thing. But I agree with you that they just were waiting for someone. They were a team that was waiting for someone else to do something. That's what it felt like. They were waiting for one of their stars to pick up and do something.
Right, and the problem with that is all of their stars expected it to be them as well, which meant they were playing individually instead of as a team. And that is not how you win championships. It's just not. No, especially when you have a team like them where they have so many stars that are capable, I'll say, of taking over a game. Because what happened is everybody kind of expected everybody else to do it. Or they tried to do too much themselves.
Yeah.
And that time and time again, it's shown that if you try and do that, in this situation, you will get burned every single time.
There's no question about it. I agree. Mike, what are your thoughts here?
Well, funny thing is that individuality that Julie and you were discussing sort of goes counter to what the Bruins have done over the last few years. I mean, that's how they won the Stanley Cup in 2011 as a team, in a team concept, getting production from all four lines and from all three defensive pairings and great goaltending tending from Tim Thomas. I can't blame Tuukka Rask for the loss in 7 games, but it just seems, in spite of the fact that the way he played last year, that they are missing something from Tim Thomas to Tuukka Rask. There's that unsaid or undefined thing that Tim Thomas had as a playoff goaltender that Tuukka Rask seems to be missing. But specifically to this series, I thought the Bruins dominated Game 5, the one that they went up 3-2. At that point, after that point, Montreal dominated. They dominated Game 6. I think it was 4-0. And then last night they get the early goal, and I agree with Julie. They were unnerved, and I think that the fact that other than Chara, Chara looked 40 years old. He looked washed out. He looked spent. And this year he was not played 30 minutes a game. He was played around 25 minutes a game. He played in the Olympics, so maybe that's a factor. But he, in Game 7, looked like he had been beaten to a pulp. And similar, last year against Toronto, one thing that Toronto did effectively was they lambasted Chara constantly throughout the 7 games. So at the end of that series, he was almost spent. Didn't stop him from, standing in front of the net when Bergeron tied the game late in the third period. But I'm just saying, they had 4 rookie defensemen, and Chara and Mazzaros, and I think that the youth on the blue line and the individuality that Julie spoke of were the reasons why they lost. And by the way, Julie did pick Montreal to go to the finals.
I did.
You've been very predictions have been really good. We've been dead on with these things. I'm telling you, this is it really felt like Boston got spooked by that first goal, and
well, it happened so quickly too.
It happened quickly, yeah, and it was the 4th line that beat them, right? Yeah. And that was surprising. And like the Pittsburgh game before, I kind of got disappointed in the fans in those arenas. Like the home Game 7 fans, there's that nervousness if you lose home Game 7s. I've been to home Game 7s, like the Vancouver home Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals.
All right.
Where they lost. But that team, that fan base, even though they later destroyed the city, was very passionate about the game. The Pittsburgh fans in Game 7 the night before, I just couldn't help but tweet out that they're just sitting on their hands. I mean, they were motionless. Like, there's more movement. That was the weird thing about it. It wasn't just that they were quiet. And the same thing happened last night with Boston. They were motionless. And it was only a 1-goal game. Mike?
Well, I think it goes hand in hand with a franchise that has been in the playoffs so many times. You look going to Major League Baseball, the Atlanta Braves fans are known as fans that sort of sit on their hands because they won the division every year. They're in the playoffs constantly. So the inspiration, the excitement of a playoff series isn't as much for them as, like, for example, what we saw in Columbus this year. I mean, that fan base was rabid because they hadn't been in the playoffs for a long time. They were hungry to see victory. The Bruins have been to the Stanley Cup Finals twice in 4 years.
Maybe it's winning the cup. Maybe once you win the cup, that is the case, right? But beyond that, I mean, I've been in Philadelphia and other cities where they've been home Game 7s that the teams have lost, where the fans were in it to the very end.
Right.
This is just, there was a real sense of uneasiness. Doom. Yeah, of doom. Mm-hmm. I think you're right. For both Pittsburgh and Boston, it felt like an inevitability somehow. That the fan base was just waiting for it to fall apart. And when it started to fall apart, they're like, well, this is what we thought was going to happen, so here we are.
And you have to factor in the fact that there was that long, 4-decade-long streak that the Bruins couldn't beat the Canadiens. There is that history there, and that inferiority complex, in spite of the fact that the Bruins have been a great team and did beat Montreal in the first round when they won the Cup. They always, no matter how good they are, no matter how bad, in spite of making the playoffs, the Canadiens are, they tend to lose to the Canadiens. So there is that bugaboo that is there. And, I think you saw that acted out in Handshake Alley after the game because, let's just say the emotion of this series and the emotion of the rivalry between these two teams is not going to end with Game 7. That's going to go on and on and on.
Let's talk about the handshake for a second. Not for too long, but
yeah.
You guys remember when Chris Chelios refused to shake hands a while ago? This happened. I guess this was a long time ago, Jules. I don't even know if you remember this.
Yeah.
But anyway, he forgot to shake hands, and at the time, people were freaking out about it. I didn't forget to shake hands. I'm sorry. He just decided not to shake hands. He skated off the ice. And at the time, people were absolutely over the moon about it. They were really pissed.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this whole thing of like, okay, that's just completely unsportsmanlike, and I hated Chris Chelios from that point on. However, in saying that, right, the screen just froze for a second. Sorry, goodness gracious, what the heck? There we go. Sorry, jeez. In saying that, when Chris Chelios was interviewed about that, he said he apologized and he said, "Guys, I'm sorry. I would have done something stupid in the handshake line, and I knew it, and I didn't want to just.
Hey.
This is a great tradition."
You don't have to shake hands.
Right.
There's nothing enforcing it. So if you don't want to do it, go to the locker room.
Right. And it's a wonderful thing. In hockey, we make a big deal of it all the time, right? It's a wonderful thing. But at the same time, you're right. You don't have to. But I kind of had a little bit of respect. Like perhaps Lucic last night, knowing his emotions were getting the better of him, Mike should have just went to the locker room and said, you know what, I'm going to say something or do something stupid.
In retrospect, maybe, but I mean, there's, I remember Dino Ciccarelli back in the day, the series that Claude Lemieux smacked Chris Draper's face against the boards and broke his face, and Dino Ciccarelli after the game and after Colorado had eliminated them, saying, "I can't believe I actually shook that jerk's hand."
Yeah.
And apparently, and I don't remember this apparently Billy Smith went with the Islanders, never shook hands.
Right, he never did. He skated off the ice, and I always hated that about him. I was like, that's not cool. But
No.
I think it's a good tradition. But
Yeah,
at the same time,
it's a good
night, I was like thinking to myself, well, maybe not. Maybe this is the way it should be. Maybe
it's a good tradition, but I will excuse somebody who, in the heat of battle, in the heat of the emotion, can't get over it or can't act gentlemanly 15 seconds, 20 seconds, a minute after the game is over with. And Lucic is a passionate, emotional player. Could he have acted a little better? Sure. Can I understand his frustration? Sure, because to the Montreal fan base, Lucic is a jerk for doing this. To the Boston fan base, he's expressing their frustration because to them, the Montreal players were cowards. Guys like Gallagher and guys like Pacioretty were turning their back. But that's a tactic, and that tactic worked. It got them frustrated.
Exactly, they were. You're exactly right. So, Julie, you just think that he should have walked off, or what are your thoughts on this? Or do you not really have a big thought on this?
To me, I think this is rather ridiculous. I'll agree with him where, they always say what's said on the ice stays on the ice. Right. Every hockey player has always said that. Whenever you ask, well, what did he say to you? Whatever's said on the ice stays on the ice.
Right.
And, like Lucic said, I wouldn't have used these words, but if they want to be a baby about it, and talk to the media and tell what I said, then they can do that. That's their prerogative, But I agree. I think it's rather stupid. At that point, you've won. When the old saying is when you lose, say little. When you win, say less.
Right.
And you won. Who cares?
Right. I'm with you. Completely.
So that's how I feel about it. But then at the same time, I honestly don't think that anyone would have noticed.
Right.
Maybe if he had left, like if he was the first person to leave the ice, but if he just milled around, nobody would have known that he didn't go through the line.
People would have known. Nobody. Chelios, and there were only like a few cameras. Now there's hundreds of cameras out there.
Right.
I think people would have known. I'm not so sure about that.
No, I think if he had been talking to the trainers and blah 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 blah. Now, like I said, had he left the ice and was like the first person to leave the ice early, then yes, I think that would have been noticed. But if he had milled around and it's like moving the food around on your plate that you don't want to eat. If he had done that, if he had skated around the ice and kind of blended in, he could have not gone through the line, and nobody would have noticed.
I disagree.
So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting. I don't think so. In retrospect, I don't think so. I was interesting though. If you saw my blog earlier, or the Danny Briere thing of him walking through the line, I did love that. I mean, I love the whole, for us to be inside that, a little bit and see what these guys say to each other. And for Briere, it's particularly funny because he's going back and forth between French and English with different players, and it was great, And let's speak about Danny Briere for a second because I have to do this.
Hey, Michel Therrien's a pretty good coach, isn't he?
Oh my God! Sorry. I mean, did you see the moment? What's funny when you watch that highlight with Briere and Therrien, or you watch the highlight with Briere going through the line. The first person that comes up to him before he goes in the line is Therrien, who basically looks at him, and Danny just skates by him, and then Therrien whacks him on the back of the head, slaps him on the back of the head, all right, good. 8 minutes. 8 minutes.
He takes total advantage of the time that he's given on the ice. And I remember I talked to him earlier in the year in Boston, actually, and I said, Danny, you're not getting, a lot of ice time, and he says to me, Julie, he says, I cannot control how much time I get, but I can control how effective I am in that time. And he goes, and that is my focus. And when he's given opportunities, he usually cashes in on them. So I don't know why you wouldn't keep giving him more.
I just don't get it.
I'm not a coach.
Some of the players on the team are not producing, Jules, and it's it's very interesting to watch these players not produce, and yet Gianta. Where is Gianta? Gianta's invisible. He has scored no point, and yet he's playing 22 minutes a game. Danny's playing 8. It's funny. I remember when Briere signed in Philly for all that money, and everybody was like, wow, that's a crazy amount of money. And I remember talking to Briere. Was one of the first interviews we did. Do you remember this? I mean, we did for the Hockey Buzz TV show we had on Comcast, and Julie and I we interviewed Briere, and we took him to I think Gino's, we went to a cheesesteak place with him. I remember talking to him and saying he was kind of upset because he wanted to go to Montreal at the time, but he's there was a lot of pressure to go to Montreal, and he was afraid of how Montreal would be on his kids, and there was a lot of things that bothered him at the time. And I said, well, are you afraid of getting all this money? You're making it. This is a ton of money now. You got a lot of pressure on him. And he's like, nah, I love the pressure. And he's like, and I'll be worth it. I promise I'll be worth it. And in Philly, he was worth it, and not just from a point of view of how well he played, but of how much money he made for the team. And what he did last night for Montreal more than paid for his salary. By getting them another 3 to 4 games in the playoffs. $4 million is a drop in the hat for what they make in 3 or 4 games in the playoffs. So
we get to see that impressive pregame presentation a few more times.
Yeah. So go ahead, Mike.
Sorry. Just looking at it though, Prust and Weiss, who were his line mates on the fourth line, only played 9 minutes. So it wasn't like he was zeroing in on Briere to limit his ice time, and he's just playing his fourth line. And in terms of fourth line minutes, 9 minutes is a lot for a fourth line. Usually it's 5 or 6 minutes but
he shouldn't be on the fourth line.
No, I agree.
He's the leading playoff scorer since the new NHL first lockout in all of hockey.
I agree. He should be. He should at least be on the third.
Like Julie said, he's making the most of his time, and he's such a professional. He's not going to sit there and be like one of those embittered guys. But he's definitely. This is totally ridiculous. Totally ridiculous.
I agree. He should be on the third line. He should be at least on the second power play. You got to remember he was, the Subban goal in Game 1. He was the guy who tipped it back to Subban on the power play. Yeah, he produces, and I actually think that he will get more ice time in a series against the Rangers because the Rangers constitute a different threat than the Bruins. The Rangers are not as physical a team. I think they're probably a faster team than the Bruins are, with guys like Zuccarello and Kreider. So I think Briere still has speed left, and I think can play that type of game. So I think he'll probably get more ice time against the Rangers.
He does have a lot of energy left. Okay, so for those of you watching at home, this week one of the things I've been doing on the bottom TV down here is I've been putting up vintage hockey games, video hockey games. We already had Nintendo. Yesterday was Blades of Steel. Today is NHL 94. Okay, so what we're going to do over here is we're actually going to put together. I started a game. We're entering the second period of Montreal versus New York in 1994, which is a kind of a fun combination of things because when you look at it, This was these were two really good teams in 1994. Okay, the Canadiens won the Stanley Cup in 1993, and the Rangers won the Stanley Cup in 1994. So these are probably the two top teams, and arguably, well, I don't even think arguably, these two teams were probably better than the two teams that we're looking at right now in the conference finals. I mean, this is the Mark Messier Rangers. This is Patrick Roy, Canadiens. I mean, this is a real deal. So. Anyway, I just thought you guys would like that, just as an aside. And above that, we have the Canadiens and Rangers played like one of the final games of the season against each other. So I thought I'd put that up there. And even though you have Talbot and another and I think the backup in goal for Montreal as well. Yeah, Buda will be in there, right? So Budai. So yeah, so I just wanted to throw that up there anyway. So let's move on. We'll keep you up to date. That's NHL '94. Awesome game if you can get it. Really, really, probably this is the game from Swingers, by the way, the movie Swingers. When we talked about that, the vintage games, you remember the movie Swingers? This is the game they're playing in the movie Swingers, NHL '94. So, anyway, there's a little geeky moment for all of you guys out there. Julie, L.A., Anaheim. It's all that we wanted it to be, right? I mean, this series is living up to everything.
Well, yeah, we wanted this series to go 7. I kind of wanted it to end last night, but then when they came out with the schedule, I was like not interested because then I mean, honestly, I'm going through withdrawal right now.
Right.
We don't have a game tonight.
It's one day.
I know, but if it was 2 days,
yeah.
Like that is not cool. So I'm really glad that the Kings won last night, just so that we could have hockey on Friday. And I don't even know why I'm saying that, because I'm going out to dinner on Friday, so I'm not going to get to watch majority of the game anyway, or at least the beginning, because it probably doesn't start till like 9, right? 9:30?
9. It's 9 here, 6 o'clock there.
Right.
Yep. And
so I'll be able to make the, I might miss the first half of the first period, but the rest I'll make. And anyways, but I was like starting to twitch, so I can't handle it.
So what are you doing tonight, Julie? What are you and Mike? What are you guys doing tonight instead of hockey? That's what I want to know.
Watching Grey's Anatomy.
Your Grey's Anatomy. All right. Where are you? What are you doing tonight, Mike?
I am playing cards with my friends.
Excellent. Playing cards with your friends.
I'm gonna get the shakes. It's gonna be bad.
Yeah, Grey's Anatomy's not gonna do it for you.
Well, the good news, although it didn't end very well. I mean, well, it was a good game, but for Team USA, it didn't end very well. But I watched, the World Championship game today, so at least I watched hockey today. So it's not too bad. But honestly, anyways, back to the Kings and the Ducks.
Yeah,
so I think this Game 7 is going to be one of the more interesting Game 7s because it's almost like it's in a neutral site. With all the Kings fans that are going to Anaheim for these games, the atmosphere is going to be absolutely unreal. If I could, I would fly out just for this game.
Yeah, me too.
But I sit there and think that 10 hours on a plane is a little much for 24 hours, So, but it could be worth it. So anyways, it's going to be fantastic. And it is going to come down to the goaltending. Because a lot of people are like, oh, Gibson this, Gibson that, Gibson this, Gibson that. Honestly, he let in 2 goals. 2.
Yeah.
That is not the end of the world.
No, they were.
So I think that they've just both played great last night. And it's really going to come down to the goaltending, which is going to be unfortunate because they are going to be the scapegoat. Whoever loses is going to be, well, you didn't play up to par, and blah, 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 blah. Look, honestly, unless it's like a 6-0 blowout, these are 2 incredibly talented goaltenders, and I think that they're both going to put on a show for us.
I agree. But pressure is, this is what goalies get paid for, right? I guess, and
exactly. But both of those goalies know how to play under pressure.
They do, and Gibson's amazing at it, considering he's only he's how young he is.
Like the coolest customer ever.
Yeah.
But he's always been like that, you know. He learned very early on in his career how to deflect all of that. And you know what else I like about him too? in regards to his demeanor and how he approaches the game, he takes full responsibility. Like they were asking him last night about, oh, that second goal you let in and blah blah blah. He's like, I didn't stop it. There was no blame.
Yeah.
There was no if this then that. It's my job to stop the puck and I didn't stop it.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that he is just so accountable to himself about, what his job is. His job is to stop pucks. They get deflected. It's still my job to stop pucks.
There is no room for error with these guys. I mean, it's crazy. There's literally, I mean, we all have our jobs. I mean, you've all seen me screw up on the blog. I've done it 5 times already during this podcast. We all make mistakes, and it's like, these guys have zero opportunity to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Mike, what are your thoughts on this one? Are you looking forward to it? Obviously, you're looking forward to it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, obviously, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, one thing, you have the present and the future of the U.S. goaltending internationally here with Quick and with Gibson. I don't think, if Anaheim loses, that Gibson is going to be the scapegoat because, a 20-year-old rookie, in spite of the fact that he's played internationally, that he played very well at the AHL level, that he's going to be blamed, because I don't think they would have gotten this far with Jonas Hiller or with Frederick Anderson. So that
Julie,
being
you okay? Sorry, I'm worried about that. Julie, you okay there?
I have a fly in my house.
I thought you were.
I thought you
passing
didn't
out
like what I was saying. So no.
No.
Sorry, continue, Mike. Sorry to interrupt you.
But in terms of, I mean, Jonathan Quick has been mostly hot in this playoff, but in specific times he's been cold, and he was cold in the first 2 games against San Jose, and he was cold in the first half of Game 5 against Anaheim. He let in 4 goals, and LA made a late charge and made it 4-3. But if that Jonathan Quick shows up in Game 7, which I wouldn't expect because usually he's a pretty clutch goaltender, but if that Jonathan Quick shows up, he might be the scapegoat because there's been no shade of gray. It's either been black or white with Quick, and he needs to be on for the Kings to have a chance. Now, I would give the Kings the upper hand because of their experience, because they're a cup winner, and the Ducks haven't won a cup since '07, and only guys like Getzlaf and Perry and Boschman were part of that team 7 years ago. But it's a 1-game playoff, and like Julie said, I think it's pretty much a neutral site. So we'll see what happens, but it'll be pretty interesting.
I mean, how many Game 7s? It's incredible. I mean,
3, right?
I mean, all
Well, 3 in this round.
3 in this round. Exactly.
6.
I mean,
6 in the
at
playoffs.
which point, I mean, it's an amazing. It's been an amazing playoff year for that. And already 6, right? 6 of how many series have there been? 8, right? So it's kind of crazy. 12 series, right? 12 series. So yeah, that's pretty amazing. Half the series going to 7. It's tight.
Really? We only had 2 last round? I feel like we had more.
No, we had 3. 3
last
last round, 3 this round.
3 last round. Yep.
Yeah, you're right.
Yep. Yeah. So I mean, that's Montreal's, by the way, taking it to the Rangers down here in NHL '94. 3-0 late in the third.
Patrick Waugh.
I know, that's Patrick Waugh. You can't beat him. And the other goal, was Mike.
Oh, for Montreal.
For the Rangers, the goalie was.
Oh, either Richter or Van Beeser. Richter was the goalie in '94 that they won with, but
Yeah, this is Mike Richter for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure. Okay, so we've got that. Let's go for some predictions for this one, for the heck of it, for the Kings and Ducks. I
honestly flip a coin.
All right, I will do that. I have a coin.
Let's do it.
Okay, heads or tails. I'm gonna use a bottle cap, but same thing. All right, so
Well, heads should be.
heads. This is tails.
Here we go.
Okay, right?
What? Okay, so heads should be the Kings because they wear things on their heads.
Right.
And tails should be the Ducks because they have feathers.
Big fluffy white tails. All right, here we go.
Tail feathers.
Heads or tails. All right. It is tails.
Tails. Ducks
The
win.
The coins say the Ducks win.
How come we're not playing them on your simulator?
Yeah. Well, we will. We will do that for
Tomorrow.
sure.
Yes.
But as far as now, Montreal's 4-0 in the Rangers. But this, of course, is 1994. I mean, Eric Desjardins on the Canadiens in this game.
John LeClair's a third liner for the Canadiens.
Yeah. I mean, but what was his name?
Gilbert Dion.
Kirk Muller who just was named coach, is actually on the Canadiens. So yeah. All right. So the coin says Ducks. I say Kings. I think the Kings find a way to do this. Just because of their experience, and just because if I love both these goalies, but if I had to pick one with a gun put to my head, I still go with Jonathan Quick at this point in his career. Mike?
I mean, when we were making our picks for this round, I picked the Kings in 6, so I'm going to stick with the Kings because, in spite of being off by a game. But I mean, I do think that their experience, the guys like Kopitar and Doughty and Quick, will make the difference. But I think it's going to be a very close game like last night. I mean, it's a one goal with an empty netter, one way or the other.
See, I think people should be allowed to change their picks. I'm not a big fan of that whole. Since I picked the Kings I picked the Bruins in 7, but before last night's game, I picked Montreal because I do there's an ebb and flow to a series, and you can see when you actually get to Game 7 where it's at. So given the ebb and flow of the series, Mike, you're still staying with the Kings.
I'm staying with the Kings because of consistency. I don't want to. I mean, I see the positives and I see the possibilities for Anaheim winning, but I picked the Kings for very valid reasons, and I'll stick with those reasons. And I'm not going to mitigate the fact that the Ducks could win it. I'll stick with the Kings. Julie?
I'm going with the Ducks.
Ooh, nice. 2 Kings.
I'm being a little bit more practical about it.
So you're going to be okay. Let's let Buzz decide. Buzz will be the tiebreaker. Hey, Buzz, what's up? What do you think, Buzzy?
Buzz isn't there.
He's right.
No, he's there. He's way in the back.
Oh,
okay,
there he is.
Buzz, do you see? Bark once for the Kings, twice for the Ducks. Go, Buzz.
Well, he did bark twice.
He did bark twice.
I guess Buzz is going for the Ducks. He never quite learned how to do the ball thing. He's bored. Go back to sleep, Buzz. What Buzz does all day. All right, so we got the Ducks. Excellent. I love it. The Rangers have gotten a goal back, but there's only 26 seconds left in this game, so I'm not looking too good down there. It's going to be fun, and we're going to keep the show short today because that's all we really have to talk about for now. We're going to get into more rumors tomorrow. I've got something I'm working on tomorrow that's pretty interesting. And I do want to know, also, I'm working on what happens with Boston next because we all talk about, there's the stars of the game, by the way, Patrick Roy, Stéphane Lebeau, and Vincent Damphousse. But yeah, we're working on a couple rumors for you tomorrow, and one of those
you're right with the something's got to change in Boston.
Yeah, something's got to change in Boston.
Pittsburgh.
Exactly. Everybody's all over Pittsburgh, right? Now, the Bruins have won a Stanley Cup recently, but the Pittsburgh Penguins won a Stanley Cup only 2 years before that. So it's not like this is a big difference. So I think something's got to give in Boston. I wonder what it'll be. I mean,
do you think they regret the Tyler Seguin for Louis Eriksson and Riley Smith deal?
Not at all.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I don't think they regret that at all.
Yeah, it was actually one of those few trades I think that was.
They got great value out of that.
Yeah,
they did, and I don't disagree with that. But the problem is that David Krejci disappeared in these playoffs. I don't know if he's starting to get a little long in the tooth. Seguin was the heir apparent to the the Krejcis and the Bergerons in terms of being a center who could be a number one, who could be a dominant offensive force.
No,
defensively, he was.
I don't think that is any part of the discussion.
See, I would draw. This is kind of interesting topic. I would draw some comparisons to Seguin and Jeff Carter, because they're two players who are ridiculously talented, and were in markets that are very similar, and went to markets that are quite different. Where the pressure's not on as much in Anaheim or Dallas, and I think that
LA. He plays for LA.
Well, LA. Sorry, yes, he does. See, I make mistakes all the time. Were I Jonathan Quick, I would be screwed right now. Not to say I'm not screwed anyway, but I would be screwed then. But yeah, I mean, here's a couple players that when you play on a team like Boston or Philly or Montreal or the Rangers or even Toronto, you play on teams that have a certain level of expectation, right? Yeah. And this didn't work out for Ritchie or Carter or Seguin. All kind of similar situations. All trades you could sit back and say the Flyers. They traded the Stanley Cup to the Kings, but they got a lot of great players for both of those players. You know, I think it was a good trade for both teams. I think the Sagan trade was a good trade for both teams. And Smith is a heck of a player, so
Yeah.
I mean, he's a big find. He might be the best player in that trade. So.
If there's one area that I think Peter Chiarelli concentrates on in the offseason, it's going to be on the blue line. Not only to take some ice time away from Chara, but I mean, you remember, I believe that you reported before the deadline that they were in on one of the Vancouver defensemen. I think it was either Edler or Kevin Bieksa, and I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know, it was Edler. You're right. And remember, Seidenberg wasn't there, and he's a huge factor for this team. I mean, he is their second best defenseman, and you know they didn't have him forever, so that plays into it.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh doesn't have a player like that they can sit back and say, okay, well, so and so wasn't there. Pittsburgh had everybody there, and have to just they really just have to hold themselves accountable. By the way, it does sound like Bylsma could be on the outs. We talked yesterday about this, Julie, when you weren't here, but Kevin was saying there's rumors of Ray Shero going as well. I'm not a big fan of moving Ray Shero. I think he's done okay. What are your thoughts, Jules, on that one?
Well, the problem here is that something has to give. There needs to be a change, and with the players that they have, it's really hard to make an impact.
Yep.
In moving, I mean, because in order to make a big sweeping change in regards to the roster, you need to make a huge move. They just don't have the space to do it in any other way. You're going to have to move someone, and it didn't happen. I just don't foresee that happening. Jordan Stahl was one thing, but I don't see it happening with any of their other big ticket players. Especially when you've got other players who need to be signed that are going to be looking to cash in on their big payday. Matt Niskanen.
Or
so
Jokinen.
It's going to be really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So when you have that, you need to look at other options and how can we, change the way that we're approaching things? And at that point, you have to look at management. You have to look at your coaching staff. Now, I think it's really difficult because I do think that they have an amazing coaching staff. I mean, just look at who they have, even as assistants.
Yeah.
It's really, spectacular. So then you have to look at your management and say, okay, well, what changes can we make here? Now, that said, I think that the Pittsburgh Penguins put together an incredibly talented team using a lot of spare parts, and to that, I give all credit to Shero.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
That's why you sit there and say he doesn't deserve to go either.
Right.
And then you have to sit back and really reevaluate and say, okay, well, did this team just not, come together at the right time? Did they underperform? What exactly happened here? Because when you look at it, whose fault is it really? The players.
It is the players' fault, but unfortunately, that's not. You can't fire everybody, right? So you're in that same old adage that we always talk about. And
there needs to be a lot of assessment. That's all. There needs to be a lot of reflection and thought about how they want to do it, because in my mind too, the only way that you go with a new GM is if you want to absolutely clean house and change things drastically. And I just don't think that's the way to go.
I don't even think they can do that. Mike, your thoughts?
Right, they can't. That's why it's not that is why it's not the way to go.
Yeah.
Well, it would take a dramatic move like finding somebody to trade for Letang or to move a Malkin and then to take the money that you were paying Malkin and pay 2 or 3 players using that money, but those aren't likely scenarios. But what people have to realize and what people have to remember is midway through the season, the only 2 guys that were healthy on this team were Crosby and Malkin. They had 5 defensemen who were out of the lineup. They had basically half of Scranton Wilkes-Barre's defensive core playing in the NHL. Neal was hurt. Dupuis was out for the season. They had to trade for Lee Stempniak to put him on a line with Sidney Crosby.
Right.
So you have to realize that team was pieced together, hodgepodge, and they had to bring in Stempniak and Marcel Gotch to fill in holes at the trade deadline. I mean, I know that Bylsma, the writing was on the wall with him. If he didn't get at least to the conference finals, he was probably going to be let go. I mean, I think that was pretty much written. I still don't see Shero getting axed. I'd be really surprised if he did, because I think he has done an effective job there. And to what Julie said about guys who need to be signed, they have a lot of young defensemen. Some of those defensemen who I mentioned before, and guys like Derek Pouliot and Harrington and Samuelson and a few other defensemen. And I think they're probably going to end up bringing those guys up and putting them into the system rather than spending probably around $8 or $9 million to re-sign both Brooks Orpik and Matt Niskanen. It just doesn't make any fiscal sense.
What's really interesting is I use the word interesting sparingly, as you guys know. But what is interesting is on my blog yesterday when I asked the question, I believe the Penguins have to change, and I gave people 4 options. They could fire Dan Bylsma, fire Shiro and Bylsma, get a new goalie, or move Malkin and or Letang, basically make a player move.
What they say?
2,800 people voted, and 34% of them said move Malkin or Letang. 30% said fire Bylsma, 23% said fire Shiro and Bylsma, and 12% said get a new goalie. They're kind of surprising numbers in a lot of ways, I thought. I mean, you don't think so, Mike?
It's pretty even.
It's even to a degree, but I did not think that people. I thought basically like what you had said, Julie. These guys, you can't really move Malkin or Letang, so I didn't expect people to go that way.
Right.
You might be able to move them, but people and with Marc-Andre Fleury, like if you had said before the playoffs started, that I was going to do this poll and they got eliminated in the second round, I would bet most people would say it was going to be get a new goalie, but he actually 12%, only 12% said get a new goalie.
He almost had 3 consecutive shutouts against Columbus. Yeah. He played very well in the series. I mean, he wasn't the reason that they lost to the Rangers.
Yeah, so they definitely backed up on that.
Yeah, I mean, he almost had 3 consecutive shutouts in the playoffs. It wasn't against Columbus.
Right.
But I mean, he played great against Columbus. He played very good against the Rangers. He wasn't the reason. The reason was, I mean, I'm sorry not to make him a scapegoat, but Sidney Crosby scored 1 goal. Something was wrong with Sidney Crosby, and if something was not wrong with him, if he wasn't hurt, then
Yeah. I mean, has something been wrong with Sidney Crosby for a while now? I mean, think about the Olympics. He really didn't perform very well either. I mean, that's the big question. Are we going to find out now that Crosby's got some kind of big injury? I guess time will tell. But that's all the time we have for today. I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Thank you for watching the podcast. Follow Julie at Julie Robenheimer. Julie, heading up to do any stuff this weekend?
No, not this weekend.
Gotcha.
But next.
Very cool. Follow Mike at Mike in Buffalo on Twitter. Follow Buzz at Kill Maggie the Monkey on Twitter. And right, Buzz? He's out cold now. We've bored the dog to tears. That's a shame. Our only actual live part of our crowd. Buzz.
Hopefully that's not a reflection of everyone else.
Hopefully the viewers, and there's a couple hundred of you guys right now, are actually enjoying this more than that. Anyway, we'll talk to you guys soon. Remember, without the buzz,
it's just hockey.
Without that buzz. Talk to you soon.